Title: Inclusive, a faculty-focused showcase of equitable and effective teaching practices emphasizing care, culture, and community in the classroom. 3 people are on the screen.
Welcome everyone to the APLU Inclusive Summit. My name is Patty O'Sullivan, Content Manager for Every Learner Everywhere, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I will be monitoring the chat for your questions that our presenters will respond to in the last few minutes of the session. We ask that you mute yourself during the session, but feel free to engage with us in the chat.
Woman speaks an inset.
This session is called Emphasizing Care, Culture, and Community in the Classroom. Our 2 presenters are Susan Adams from Achieving the Dream and Stephanie Whalen from Harper College. Susan Adams is the Associate Director of Teaching and Learning at Achieving the Dream, where she manages programs and projects designed to build institutional capacity, innovation, and meaningful engagement of full-time and part-time faculty in their professional development efforts in teaching and learning that support equitable student outcomes. Susan produces dynamic thought leadership around equitable instructional design strategies and that contextualize student success work to colleges' teaching and learning efforts by connecting institutions to best practices, peer institutions, colleges, examples, and resources. Susan earned an M.Ed in Student Affairs Administration from the Woodrick College of Education, Western Washington University, and a BA in English Literature and Women's Studies from the University of New Hampshire. Stephanie Whalen is the chair of the Academy for Teaching Excellence and professor of English and Interdisciplinary Studies at the William Rainey Harper College in Palatine, Illinois. Stephanie co-leads multiple cross-institutional collaborations, such as the Teaching for Equity Community of Practice, the Equity Literacy Project, open educational resource, and the Equity Teaching Academy, which includes a 3-course series, Examine, Reflect, and Redesign. Her 2016 dissertation, Dream Keepers at the Gate, Culturally Relevant and Responsive Pedagogy in the Community College Classroom, illustrates that the common conceptions and shared visions of educators identified as especially engaging and supportive of systemically non-dominant students provide the foundation for planning for and responding to diverse student needs in ways that are unique to each instructor, but connected to consistent equity themes. Susan and Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Patty. I want to let you know Stephanie's in the waiting room, so we can just let her in. I let her know that you've done the intro here. Thanks everybody for participating today and being here. I'm excited to share some real tangible takeaways. Stephanie and I have worked together to put together this presentation where you can really walk away with some great ideas. And we also are going to provide you with an opportunity at the end to have some Q&A where you can ask us some specific questions about how we use these activities in our classrooms, and kind of a theory and the pedagogy behind it as well. So I'm going to start here. You'll see my head turning a little bit because I'm sharing my screen over here, but we want to give you the intended outcomes for today, where we want to help you understand the value of reflection and metacognition as a way to really create a sense of care and community in the classroom. We're also going to help you understand how to integrate reflective elements into your course as a way to get to know your students. Explore ways of empowering your students to take actual ownership of their learning, and then consider approaches to facilitating authentic and transparent conversations with your students, which I know can be tough at times. Stephanie's got some real opportunities to share some great ways we can think about, what happens when there might be a difficult conversation that happens? What are some ways we can set a tone in those instances? And then we're going to talk a little bit about assessments, how to do transparent assessments, how to help think about how can we give students choice and create an opportunity for them to be aligning the course concepts to their career goals through transparency of our grading approaches. So this is our speaker list. We've already introduced ourselves, so I'll just move on from there. So I'll start right off with jumping right into reflection and metacognition. So there's been a ton of research around this. that really students can transform and really engage in a much stronger way when they're actually reflecting on the whole course, the learning outcomes, and how it meets their career goals, their intentions for the course, and their own learning pathway. So it really connects to, we can set the stage with these reflective activities throughout the course for students to begin to learn how to self-regulate, how to have self-efficacy, and even just enhance those skills that might already exist in them. It improves thinking skills and promotes conceptual awareness. So students benefit from assignments that encourage them to reflect on their learning. So well-designed reflections help students move beyond the like and dislike, right? So if we ever done an online forum, we really want more substantive posts and responses with each other versus like and dislike. And again, when they're connecting these concepts to their own personal lives and their goals, you can see a lot more motivation from students as well. And students view assignments more actively as a way to build different skills and different kinds of thinking. And reflective assignments increase students' declarative knowledge or ability to articulate what they've learned. So really giving them the time to do that. So there's many options for integrating this into your course. You can add reflective components to graded coursework and exams. So even though it's an exam, maybe they reflect on how that exam went for them, what might have been difficult, what might have been really easy. Provide multiple representations of knowledge. You want students to learn and multiple activities for practicing. So a lot of times we talk about differentiated instruction. So multiple modes of students being able to consume knowledge, but also be able to bring it back. And that can be done in a multitude of modalities. And varying that through the course can also really help get at this idea of reflection. Encourage students to open up about what is confusing. A lot of faculty have done muddiest points. So what was the muddiest point today? Think about that and bring it back to the next class. So sometimes you can do that in a survey tool in your LMS or other, even just paper and pencil if you're in the classroom. And provide a forum in which students can monitor their own thinking. I love learning journals. I think it's a great opportunity to add this metacognition sort of on top of the assignments, but really look at the students, my own progression as I'm learning. And ask students to set intentions and be present and engaged. Setting, again, that tone for a community of learning is super helpful. And again, adding layers of reflection and questioning throughout the course is really helpful there. So we have a great asset to share with you. Patty's going to place this in the chat. It's called Caring for Students Playbook. And I actually got to co-author this with a bunch of fantastic colleagues. We had a great time thinking through how could we care for students. And one chapter is on assessing your students with care, which we're going to speak to, and so is Stephanie as well. But we wanted to get you an opportunity to download this, as it has sort of these 6 recommendations that go all the way from the syllabus to actually caring for yourself, right? That we want to really model how can we really create these environments of learning where we all care for each other in a thoughtful way. So one way to think about assessments is, how can our assessments give distinct insights into learning? There's so much that can happen with how we design an assessment. And the more we can connect it to students' personal lives, not that we would know what that is, but invite them to make that connection, to even being able to connect to their careers is a really great way to create a caring, a sense of assessments. And it also can leverage and support their growth when it's really meaningful and relevant to them, not just a multiple choice exam that, one and done. How can there be some reflective arenas or opportunities around even a multiple choice exam that helps students support their own growth and have agency in that? And again, how can we design assessments to make room for students' lived experiences? I don't have all the answers, right? The context of each discipline is going to be different, but these questions are an area of reflection for you as an instructor to begin to have a thoughtfulness to, what are my assessments like now, and how might they be able to move the needle into this direction of connecting to students' lived experiences? So why use a variety? Assess different aspects of student learning. So some are going to be visual, some are going to be auditory. That's sort of a low-hanging fruit type of variety, but also support inclusivity by providing different ways for students to demonstrate their learning. Maybe it would be a storyboard, maybe it would be a video, maybe it would be a mapping type of assignment. And, leaning into that multi-pronged approach, leveraging traditional and conventional testing with authentic assignments or assessments. And also thinking about the idea of formative assessment. So that's going throughout the course versus one big exam at the end being summative. So some of the assessment types examples are there for you as well. And being transparent, right? So how can we really be clear? A lot of times you'll get a ton of questions. I don't understand this assignment, or I'm unclear about what you're really asking for. So we have some tools through two ways. Understanding by Design, which is a great book, which helps you connect what results you want with how you actually present the assignment itself. The other is the TILT framework, and this is transparency and learning. And this has a really nice template for you to be able to give, where do you want students to be able to get to? What's the criteria? And what's the purpose of it? How is it connecting to the outcomes of the course? So those frameworks and the Understand by Design are a really great way to help you be more transparent and clear with students, which is a hard thing to do when you have a lot of content you want to cover. It really is important to be thoughtful about how you're presenting the assessments. And that's where you can have clear expectations. How can students prepare for the assessment? What can they expect when they engage with the assessment? What do the criteria for success look like, right? So the more we can be clear about that, the more successful students can be. I want to bring in some of my colleagues here, and Stephanie's going to come up in just a moment, but I also have some other colleagues that couldn't be here today that had some great, again, reflective strategies and activities. And here comes kind of your takeaways. And one of them being to have your students annotate your syllabus. It's a great, you can put your syllabus, for example, in a Google shared doc space, digital space, and give them actually an assignment where they are required to comment, right? And get a chance to really understand what might be challenging in that syllabus for them, what might be something that they predict would be easy, why or why not, what might be clear or unclear. It's a great activity, again, to be a partner with your students. Again, having that transparency of learning, and also you're going to get some great feedback about what might be coming down the pike around what their questions might be about the course. Another really fun one is a gift check-in. So Kristen put together is, how's it going, right? So put up a GIF, and here's some of the responses she got, which cracked us all up, right? So some of the students were like, this is too much work. Other students were like, I don't get it at all. Others might have been, yes, this is great. I'm learning a ton. Here's how it's going for me. You can see sort of the on fire pieces. What a great activity to be fun in the digital space, to really kind of get a sense of where students are. And you could do this every week. You could do this at the end of every class. Again, a gift check-in is a great strategy for connecting to your students and kind of doing that formative, even sort of anecdotal assessment of how things are going for them. Another is to take all the exams and do an actual review session. I think this has been somewhat traditional, but even taking it a bit deeper is having students reflect on the exam experience themselves. So it's teaching students how to learn. This is getting back to that metacognition piece. And Dr. Ryan Luke at University of Louisville put that together as an example. And return the first exam and ask students to reflect on their work and offer the opportunity to make points for submitting a thorough and thoughtful reflection to the questions that they missed. Again, what a great opportunity. Instead of sort of this high stakes, anxiety provoking moment, they get an opportunity to actually go back and say, oh, I got that wrong because, and they submit the rationale for what that is. And they might even find a mistake or something of a question that was kind of muddy enough or confusing enough that you might rewrite that question as well. So again, partnering with students in the assessment process is a great opportunity here. And always mid-semester feedback. Studies show that can improve student performance. Oh, I thought I was doing well, and now I'm not. So finding strategies to be able to do kind of mid-semester check-ins, even peer-to-peer connections can start to happen there too, where they can support each other on improving their efforts in the class.
Text mid-semester feedback.
Yeah, Yeah, so have a plan for requesting and reviewing mid-semester feedback. Give your students time to respond, give yourself time to respond. And here are just some questions. And we're going to download this for you, and you're going to be able to take this deck away. But again, some takeaways for what could a mid-semester check-in look like? And these are some example questions that you might consider, again, to help you teach the course more effectively to them and for them to learn more effectively as well.
Slide title.
All right, I hope I'm on time there. I know I rushed a little bit with a lot of content there, but again, we're going to give you this deck and I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie.
So one of the things that we think is just as important as ever is creating a community where students can have a safe and empowering discourse, but they might not know how to do that. So you might notice here just a little image from the Great Debaters, which is often an example I use, with students as really a skill that we should highly value, not just in our schools, but in society in general. So the goals of our classroom discourse are to engage in disciplinary learning, how to explore and make meaning and discuss topics and issues in our discipline, but also validating multiple ways of looking at things and discussing things and making meaning together and sharing that meaning through multiple modes that the students might find most interesting and engaging, increasing the understanding of multiple perspectives as being our primary goal, generating that socio-political awareness, through the learning experience, cultivating critical consciousness so that students are walking away, being able to more critically evaluate and engage in all of their courses, a space for modeling democratic participation, and just, of course, building that strong community with a sense of trust and belonging. So as we move to the next slide, I think that one of the things that came up in a session we were talking about with our disciplinary community of practice is that we want to find multiple opportunities to communicate these shared expectations and roles and norms within our classroom. So one of the things could be putting a statement in the syllabus. When we create instructions for activities and discussions, that's another place to reinforce that we're really trying to learn with and from each other. Headers on assignment sheets, verbal reminders before class discussions, throughout the discussion, so that you're really welcoming multiple perspectives, and in comments on student writing. So one thing we have to share with you today that's already been posted in the chat by Susan. Oh no, I'm sorry, by Patty. Patty placed a link in the chat you might see. It's a reflective activity for brainstorming and norming within the classroom. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about that activity in particular. And again, this is just a screen snip from the heading of it. So you should be able to click on that link in the chat and then access a Google Doc that you can copy and edit and adapt for yourselves. But the components of the norming exercise are, identifying as a class potential challenges to healthy and productive discourse. So in the past, what's come up that has made that difficult, and then describing faculty and discussion leader roles and norms. When we are facilitating a discussion, how can we sort of try to bring in multiple perspectives and work together, as well as how can student and participants in those discussions also help to create and maintain that space. So also we want to look at realistic examples, things that as instructors we've seen currently happening, things that students can identify, and how we would work through those things before it happens. And that way it helps us to together define a healthy, productive discourse. So moving on, we also have some other things that we'd like to share with you. One important component, no matter what modality you're teaching in, is having multiple ways to establish presence and identity. And I think one of the things we've learned is that anything that we did when we were doing the exclusively online teaching during the pandemic, now we can bring back into these blended, hybrid, and face-to-face courses. So even if we are having a face-to-face course, having an intro discussion board where students can talk about why they're here, what's their purpose, a little bit of, their orientation toward the discipline and personal goals, or, history sort of with that discipline, asking them to include a representative photo or image or avatar. So you can see sometimes students include, important relationships, or they create an avatar look like this Lego looking one where a student, doesn't really want to share their face, perhaps in an online course, but wants to create a sense of identity. Or perhaps additionally, just sharing important things I like to do. Like I've seen chess, I've seen hockey, pets, things like that. So yeah, the Frayer model is probably coming in there because my background years ago was literacy. So I'm recognizing that as well. So thanks for putting that in the chat. And then also, creating some kind of attendance card, like we just mentioned with the Frayer model, someone mentioned in the chat, you want to sort of create a way to intentionally learn people's names right away. And something like this card allows you to have students introduce pronouns, what they go by, but also some key info, and you can pass them out and collect them, or use them to sort in groups, or use them to call on people, or separate it into a pile of who's in person, who's attending virtually, who's attending asynchronously, all kinds of uses for those kind of things. And then we can use them for check-ins to practice names by giving a prompt where we'd like to hear from people, and then sort of going through and giving everyone a chance to talk. So just want to focus on, typically we do one thing for a course, but multiple ways of getting students early on to establish their presence and identity can really make a big difference.
Title.
So going on to our next idea, we wanted to talk about how important it is to humanize ourselves by sharing our struggles. So one of the things you might do is share your struggles with college learning overall, or lessons learned specifically, even in that discipline. Describe your own bottlenecks in the discipline. And we put the link to the book to Decoding the Disciplines.
A colorful wheel graphic.
One of the things you might do is talk about something that you thought that was maybe a misconception, or somewhere you got stuck in your discipline, and how you worked through that. And then also ask students if they too shared that misconception, or did they have other issues or misconceptions, so that you can understand their current mental model as well, or ways that they've sort of worked through some of those misunderstandings. And then utilizing stories of how previous students navigated all types of challenges that they've had, with learning, time management, studying in general, but also specifically in the discipline. So next we want to go on to talking about creating and supporting collaboration. So I think we've all had to level up during this time because we were exclusively online, and it seemed to be such a disconnected and isolating experience. So one of the things you can do is gather info from a student self-assessment or posts, about topics of shared interest, and group students together that way. Then once you have them grouped together, give them some guided activities and structure so that they build those communities, but then also provide them a forum for group communication, and encourage groups to create their own, methods and platforms for communication. So what you're seeing here is actually, groups can meet online via your learning management systems platform, usually for a virtual meeting, incentivizing that by not only having them sort of write out what they've done in an active engagement log that can be toward course credit, but even sometimes capturing a screenshot of a group meeting. You also see a picture here of a HyFlex class where people are streaming in from home, and people are meeting in groups with partners that are home, and then also engaging in the chat as a back channel, so that students in the classroom and at home, can communicate a little bit extra on the side to just kind of create that connectedness. And then also sharing guidelines and giving a lot of coaching on how to make group, work well. So we want to make the group works, that group work go well. And so we want to see things like students, connecting even outside the classroom, walking out together, walking in together during break, going and getting snacks and things like that. We want to encourage all of that so that students feel joy and connectedness coming into the class, or engaging in the class from home, or even asynchronously when that's required. So next, we wanted to talk a little bit about the power of contextualizing their experience and showing your enthusiasm and caring. So starting off each class session with a current connection to the course theme. So what's going on? Unfortunately, in our area, we had a 4th of July shooting. So because we're examining inequities in education, right away, it seemed the natural thing to bring that in and talk about, what's happening or not happening in schools, that might lead to preventing these tragedies, whether you're talking about mental health support, connectedness, critical engagement with gun control and things like that. So a current headline or media. Also, we've used examples just this week from Stranger Things season 4, episode 1, to talk about isolation with students and things like that. So, just bringing in references from popular culture and allowing students to talk about those, sharing your own personal reactions, but also saying, this is just my opinion or my thought. I'd like to have your opinion, your thoughts, your comments. And then, continually connecting these attention getters back to the course theme throughout class so that students just have a deeper level of thinking and connecting the material inside class to things going on or things they're experiencing outside of class. And then just frequently reminding students of the bigger picture, the why, behind the course theme. So next, we wanted to talk a little bit about transparency and grading. And I think this is obviously different in different disciplines, but one of the things that has seemed to really work well for students is simplifying the overall assessment plan, like how many points are in the course. Currently with an English 101 course, I'm doing a 100-point course. So if you miss a 15-point assignment or you lose 5 or 10 points here or there, you know exactly how that's affecting your grade. So you want to be as explicit and detailed as possible with the criteria, but reduce the point ranges so that they're just making sense to students, more quickly. So that's one thing to think about. Allowing students also to resubmit so that they can see explicitly, if I have lost some points here, what can I do to make those up? And, if you have fewer assignments, but they're more important, but students can redo to show learning and show growth, that just kind of makes that transparency of the learning process and what's
Text,
important.
transparency and grading. Simplify grading rubric.
Important. So is weighted total too complicated? Yes and no. I think you figure out what's right for your students. But I think at least for this class, where I've really simplified everything to this class is 100 points, so your percentage point corresponds directly with points earned, and the rubrics are all simplified down so the point ranges don't feel ambiguous or arbitrary anymore. Either you're doing it or you're not doing it, or maybe there's middle of the road, you're doing it, you're partially doing it, or you're not doing it at all. That just has helped to simplify things for students. So also giving course credit for having students keep track of learning in a chart. So, what are the errors or issues you had? How did you correct them or, change your understanding? And then how can you remember that going forward and making that worth some course credit? And then making sure that culminating assignment is one where students are showing growth. So, something is building towards showing growth specifically. So that's that transparency and how you've designed the learning experience, how they should engage in it, and what successful growth and learning looks like. And then obviously continually discussing every time you pull up assignment rubric and things like that, getting student feedback and modifying, as you go. So next, we just wanted to talk a little bit about, reflective teaching. So, asking students to share their ideas for adjustment to assignments. And that gives you the opportunity to clarify something that they might not have understood why you're doing it or why it's important, but also make adjustments when you can. Determining schedule changes, be a discussion, if people are needing more time, asking about what does or would increase their sense of belonging. Susan mentioned the mid-semester survey. It's great to add a question about belonging to that. Talk to students about their experiences before class, on break, after class. These are golden opportunities to find out how it's going for them and then reflect on how it's going for you and share that with them. And then continually discussing student feedback and just clarifying, because again, with that transparency framework, we want to make sure we continually explain how we've designed this learning experience for students and the importance of each task that we're doing instead of assuming they know it. And then, of course, modify things based on their feedback if and when we can.
Text, reflective teaching.
So that's about it for just those few ideas that we wanted to share. You're to see some image there of me talking with students in the library, getting them out and around campus and getting them familiar and comfortable with resources, and then students in my office hours. Again, those are things that on that active engagement learning log, they can put those things down and they actually go toward course credit. So accessing a library resource, talking to the professor in office hours and things like that.
A person lectures via video call.
It's so great to see the pictures, right? I haven't had that. I super appreciate that, Stephanie. It's like, okay, yeah, we are actually back on campus in some instances. And so that's great to see.
Well, one thing that's happened on our campus too is during the pandemic, when people were exclusively online, we adapted. So now we have a live chat going on with the librarians. It's 24 hours a day. Our school's librarians during the day, and then librarians from other places filling in 24 hours. So there's a lot more ways to engage and connect now.
That's great. So they log. Tell me a little bit more about that logging. So do you have a list of activities that would constitute a point?
Yeah, and if you want to pull up that sheet, we did give the link to the engagement activities log that we use to incentivize all kinds of student engagement. So that link,
The screen shows names.
Is in the chat. I can repost it for you now if that helps.
Great.
I think Patty just posted it. But basically what I've done was I've come up with a variety of ways that I can think of that students would want to engage in the course. And then I ask them to discuss that with me and maybe generate some more. So we have one sort of log that's just examples, and there's 3 categories. So active engagement in the course, obviously attending class is important, but in the case of many of my classes now, you can stream in if needed or engage in materials asynchronously as a third option. But I really encourage, community college students in their first, second year to try to have on-campus presence and engagement if possible. Just emailing with the professor, posting and responding to one another in a questions asked and answered discussion board, posting and replying to their group's discussion board. So those are some ideas of how they could actively engage in the course. And then I separated out actual, outside class meetings. So meeting with classmates and or writing group members, meeting with the professor. It could be after class, it could be virtually, it could be, in a small with their group, working with a librarian, like I mentioned, the live chat or appointment or the writing center, and thinking about other ways to be resourceful. So these came from talking with the students, like asking a friend or family member to proofread an essay with you, using online tools to identify errors. In all disciplines now, there's tons of ways to generate a meaningful learning experience with other online resources outside the course and outside the required material. So that gives them some ideas, and that's sharing that cultural capital, that college knowledge that they may not otherwise, be aware of these multiple ways to engage. And then I ask them, and again, this is a 15 points in the course. And since the course is 100 points, it's 15 percentage points toward that letter grade. So in this case, in the log, then they would describe their participation. And obviously this isn't an exclusive list. There's other things that they've come up with, for each category that they write down. So that's due at the end of the course. And it really incentivizes all the ways we want students to engage, but we don't necessarily always make it explicit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what I love about this is so many students, and that I've had in the past where this is dismissive, like, oh, yeah, you're right. I should probably, meet with my advisor, or, oh, yeah, I should, like it just feels like a very kind of, add-on kind of thing. But this brings it to the forefront, right? And it really helps them because you're really requiring it of them, but then they get to be reflective about it, right? Because they have to describe what it was that they actually did. And it gives that extra moment of recognizing the value, because it's likely going to be a very valuable experience to do any one of these engagement activities. And then they're going to have that moment of like, oh, I'm really glad I did that. And it'll just motivate them to continue to do it in another class that might not require it like you did. So I appreciate that.
When we talk about those stories of how we struggled, I'll often reflect on, when I didn't do these things because I wasn't aware of them, or when I did some of them and how, things started to change or open up for me. And students will often share those stories as well, especially if prompted. So it just gives it, that overarching, let's think about the ways we can engage, and then let's incentivize it, because frankly, no one's doing optional right now because they just don't have the time.
Yeah. The world's accelerating so fast, and the more we can, I mean, it's almost impossible not to, right? So the more we can create it as a way that's not just a busy work, but something meaningful and relevant is great. So I applaud that. So we want to open it up. We have about 10 minutes left, which is actually plenty of time to answer some of your questions. I'm also willing to go back to some of the slides if you wanted to kind of look at them a little more deeply. I'll stop sharing now to open it up, and you can put it in the chat, or you can also unmute your mic.
Text your engagement activities log.
Susan and Stephanie, we have a question. How can we make collaborative learning activities meaningful for students? We hear so often how students hate group work and don't find value in it. Can you give us some advice around group work?
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that group work, experience can be frustrating for students. And so to give them a guide for, okay, getting started with your group, establishing how are you going to communicate to plan time together. So do you want to use their school email? Is there some other platform you all agree to? I actually even give coaching on appropriate communications, because as you know, every once in a while we'll have a student who doesn't understand how to maintain that professionalism with colleagues that they're contacting in class. So there's that. And then talking about, how to identify one another's strengths within the group and plan to divide up the labor so that we're really leveraging each person's strength, but that everyone is participating. And then having that be sort of part of any sort of grading rubric or reflection after they've done the project was, how did you engage? And, you can actually even see that if you set up in your learning management system, platform for the groups to have their own discussion boards and meet together and things like that. So they sort of know there are digital ways that you can see that too. I've asked them, one of the pictures you saw was based on the idea that students can take a screen snip or a selfie if they're meeting virtually, a screen snip of their group meetings, and then put that in their engagement activities log, or a selfie if they are meeting at the coffee shop or in the library. So things like that. But I think what we've learned and what I've seen other colleagues doing is just creating a guide for doing your group work, step by step. So you're in phase 1, communicating, planning, scheduling. Phase 2, identifying strengths, dividing up the labor. Next phase, keeping each other on track, setting deadlines, breaking big tasks into smaller tasks, and then some final steps. So I think, planning that for your group and giving them that, and then talking through it with them can really help a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some great in the chat. There's some great resources and advice around group work.
Speaker raises hands above head.
All right. Any other questions from the participants for our presenters today? And you can just unmute if you're comfortable doing that, or you can enter your question in the chat. Alexandra.
Kathy Ostman. Jen Keller.
Just wanted to say hi to everybody. This has been awesome.
Someone waves.
Hello. Thank you. I'm just catching up with some of the things in the chat too. I like somebody mentioned, when your groups are meeting in class to stop by, each group and talk through and sort of get a sense of who's doing what, so that just, some of the group members don't end up hiding or even sort of just feeling shut down because some of the other groups are, some of the other group members are really, taking charge and things like that. So I think that was a good tip that someone also put in the chat.
And that's where the transparency about how you're going to grade the group assignment, like being really clear, even showing the rubric, then allows them to do some peer-to-peer learning and teaching with each other, right? So that accountability can be much easier and avoid some of those frustrations and that roll of the eye that we often get because everybody's really clear about where they're getting to and where they're therefore being able to identify the gaps that might be happening.
One thing I do in the group work is
meeting participants.
Classic, if you're from literacy background, Stephanie, classic cooperative learning uses positive interdependence, individual accountability, group accountability, and things. So the way I did it in Blackboard is there's a wiki, and everybody has to, in the group, they choose a leader, there's group assigned, they decide who's what, and they have to post so many times in the wiki. I literally have to say this many words. I mean, I know it seems constricted, but they have to post a week prior to the due date of the assignment. So everybody's done their research and work together on that. So then they actually can spend that next week working on their presentation, which will be digital. That has increased participation. And something I do, and this might be harsh, I don't know, what do y'all think? But if they haven't posted in the wiki by that Sunday before the next week the assignment's due, then I take them out of the group and they do the assignment on their own. But most people really say, okay, I'll do it. I was like, well, you better get some posting done. So that's something I do for like accountability. So you have an individual grade in the wiki, but your group grade, so.
I think there's some incentivizing in there that can also feel playful, right? Like if it's not this onerous, punitive thing, but it's about really taking stock into what you're emphasizing and that what's really important to create that community of learning. And so,
right, that I want them talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I love Stephanie's idea about maybe posting pictures or using other alternative ways. I just have large classes, so the wiki is a quick way to grade,
Right.
participation.
Sue Hellman.
Right.
I like what you said there too, because sometimes students actually do really prefer to work independently. So as much as we want to make sure there are some opportunities where they work in groups and in teams, some students at some points, just it might not be possible for them to really engage outside of class. So to sort of add that option, I'm putting you in a group and phrase it as, if you're not able to engage in the group by this date, it may be better for you to do it on your own. So it's not punitive. It's more of a, realistically speaking, it's not, your group will have moved on ahead and you can still participate, but you might do it differently. So I think I like what you're saying, and I agree that can be a good strategy.
We do need to wrap up. This has been a great session with great resources and great advice. So thank you to our presenters. Thank you to everyone for attending this session. As a reminder, please stay with us to the end of today's summit. At 4 p.m. Eastern time, following the final session of the day, there'll be a short survey. So we talked about surveys as a way to stay engaged, that what's good for the students is good for the teachers, right? So there'll be a short survey. If you complete the survey, you can earn a digital badge for attending the Inclusive Summit, and you'll be entered into a raffle to win $100 and a $500 gift card. So we were giving you some incentives on top of engaging with your fellow teaching colleagues. So thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
One quick thing, Patty, there's so many resources in the chat. People are asking how to save the chat. I think there's 3 dots on the upper right of there, and you can go ahead and save the chat if you'd like. But Patty, remind me, are we going to share the deck with some of those links in there?
Yes, we are going to share the recordings afterwards. We'll share the deck, and we'll actually put the resources directly into the deck, so people will have that available to them.
Great. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Mike Brokos.